I always tell my patients to get curious around why your body is doing anything, right? Like if it's telling you if you have an ache or a pain, or if you're tired that day, or if your eyes are puffy, just start asking those questions. Start wondering, why is my body responding like this? Your body slowly talks to you. It whispers, then it talks, then it raises its voice, and then it screams really loudly. And for most of us, we wait till it's screaming at us to do anything when it started whispering 5 years ago, right? Like you had signs.
Welcome to the Natural Health Matters podcast, where it's all about maximizing your health potential so that you can look and feel your best at any age. I'm your host, David Sandstrom, naturopathic doctor and biblical health coach, and this is episode number 83. Today we have on the show Dr. Shannyn Pearce. Dr. Shannyn is a doctor of chiropractic, integrative health coach, and nationally known speaker and educator. She has a passion for women's hormones, thyroid, and autoimmune issues. After being diagnosed with fibromyalgia at a young age, she began her lifelong quest to find non-medical answers to common health issues. Dr. Shannyn, welcome to Natural Health Matters.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. This is going to be a good conversation.
Yeah, I think so too. I've really been looking forward to this conversation. So today, especially over the last couple of years, most of us are experiencing a great deal of stress. And I really think that burnout is a real issue for a lot of people. So I want to talk about that today. But before we get into that, let's talk about you just for a little bit. Let's get to know Dr. Shannyn a little bit more. Give us a 35,000 foot view of what you do.
Yes. So my passion in life, specifically, I have a heart to really change women's healthcare because I've had just this up and down story of my own health journey, right? Learning all the things that work and don't work. And along that journey, I really realized there's a lot of women who feel the same way. It's just so rarely discussed or so rarely properly managed, right? Even if it is discussed, that I always say, I believe we will change healthcare if we make enough healthy women who make healthy babies, like that's how we change the world, but it's just not happening, right? So even through my own experience, I was already a doctor when I had my big breakdown, big burnout, and I'm sure we'll get into more of those details. So I would have considered myself a very educated person, and I still ended up having a major health crisis. So now my passion is to teach women how to properly take care of their bodies and their health, both physically and emotionally, so they can avoid burnout, but also create a life they love, to wake up feeling vibrant, to be happy and confident in their body, to be able to play with their kids without being exhausted, to really just feel good and know the proper way to take care of their health.
Excellent. Well, you mentioned your health crisis, and I found that to be true. When I had my health coaching practice, almost everyone that would come to me had some kind of a health crisis going on. And people that have gotten into the field of natural and holistic, integrative medicine, whatever you want to call it, generally have a health crisis story of their own. So tell us a little bit about yours.
Yes. So I wish I could tell you I had like one breakdown and learned my lesson. That's just never the way that goes, right? I'm a hard learner, and I think a lot of people have the same thing. So I was actually diagnosed with fibromyalgia after a head injury when I was 8 years old. And I've struggled with chronic pain most of my life. And my first experience when I knew there had to be a better way, I went to a neurologist when I was about 10. Severe migraines, chronic pain, irritable bowel syndrome, like very physically struggling. And this doctor at the time looked at me and said, I think it's fibromyalgia. And to a 10-year-old kid in real pain, he said, that means it's all in your head and you're going to have to learn how to manage these symptoms.
Oh, brother.
At 10 years old. And I look back and I just tell myself daily, I thank God that I knew better, because if I would have let those words be true for me, right? If I would have took that for face value and just decided the rest of my life was going to suck and I was going to get really good at pain management, I can't imagine where I would be right now.
Right.
So that thankfully stimulated my mom at the time to get me my first chiropractic adjustment. That was my first introduction to holistic healthcare, right? We were not holistic people. We were very medical people. By the age of 10, I was on 10 different prescription medications.
Oh, boy.
So I've done it the medical way and got worse, not better. Got my first adjustment and my headaches went away. That was the first time since I was 10 years old. I've been telling everyone I was going to be a chiropractor. So like in class, you always ask, would everyone wants to be a lawyer? Everyone's a chiropractor since I was 10 years old, never changed. But then again, I wish that was the end of the story, right? And then everything gets better. But having a passion, and you probably know this with your health coaching business, sometimes can come at a level of burnout too, right? Do you know what I mean? Like just
Yeah.
having that passion and wanting to do everything and wanting to do it so quickly. I think I overdid it. And I ended up
Hmm.
having a major physical health crisis after the birth of my first child. I was having more fibromyalgia symptoms. I was having migraine headaches. I was feeling awful. And that's actually the first time I started getting into more functional medicine and learning about the
Okay.
in-depth testing. And I went all in, and I took a couple of years, and I really fixed my physical health. Wish that was the end of my story, right? So I found this thing. I loved it. I knew it could help people. I wanted to help people. So I went all in, 100 miles an hour, helping people through functional medicine. Got pregnant with my second child. About a year after she was born, I started having very emotional burnout. I was exhausted because same thing. I loved it. I loved what I was doing. I felt like I was helping people. So I went back to it full time, and I couldn't figure out why. I couldn't handle my emotions. I was crying for no reason. Things that I thought used to be really fun, like getting on calls with people, doing interviews like this, going out with friends, just stopped being appealing altogether. I didn't feel like doing anything. And that was really
Mm.
my first personal experience with emotional burnout.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, oh crap, there's two big pieces to this that I don't think people understand. And just because you heal
Hmm.
from it once doesn't necessarily mean you're better. We have to know how to properly balance our physical and our emotional health so we don't find ourselves back in those situations. So it took me
Yeah.
many tries to get to where I am today.
Excellent. So it sounds like, I mean, there's a lot of details to fill in there, right? But how you feeling today? You feel like you're in victory today,
Oh,
or
absolutely. 100%. I have
excellent,
the tools. I know how to properly take care of myself. I know what to do if things start to deviate. And that's true preventative medicine, right? It's not that things don't happen,
excellent.
it's that you know how to take care of yourself.
Right. The reason why we're having this conversation right now, Natural Nation, is so that you can avoid the crisis, right? You can implement some of the principles that Dr. Shannon's going to be talking about and not have the crisis. We prefer that everybody just enjoy vibrant health without having to go through that trial. So, um, burnout is more than just something that CEOs of major corporations experience. Burnout is something that almost everyone at some level has experienced some point in their lives. And as you said, it can be mental emotional burnout or it can be physical burnout, and there can be a lot of factors. So talk to us about how you figure out if so when someone comes to you, if they're experiencing burnout, what are the signs and symptoms and that kind of thing.
Major signs and symptoms start with a deep amount of fatigue that doesn't seem to be alleviated through sleep, right? Sleep disturbance is a big one.
Hmm.
Brain fog, and when all of a sudden you feel like too much stimulus, it's hard to multitask. The kids asking you for one more drink of water is enough to make your brain want to explode. Those are big
Yeah.
signs of nervous system burnout.
Hmm.
Uncontrollable emotions, feeling like I could cry for no reason, or nothing's wrong, but I feel impending doom, or things that you used to love not feeling exciting anymore. Those are all your first signs of burnout. And typically, even by the time you feel those, you're probably pretty far into the physical imbalances that have created those symptoms. But those are the main things I'll hear people say that they're noticing when they're identifying
Hmm.
it's burnout.
Hmm. So what do you do? Do you run some lab tests, or what do you do with that person?
Yes. Lab tests are my love language. It's like my favorite thing to do. The better your testing is, the better decisions you can make, because physical
Yeah.
and emotional stress are going to make physiological imbalances. So specifically, there's going to be some pressure on the adrenal glands. There's probably some disturbance in the microbiome because the gut is hugely affected by stress and inflammation. Checking
Yep.
hormone balances for men and women. For women, it's normally lower progesterone in stress. For men, it'll tank your testosterone. So making sure
Hmm.
we're seeing for each individual, how is your body adapted to these stressors? Because it's not going to be the same for everybody. So if we can find out those levels, we can find out your patterns, then we can make a game plan to properly support yourself. And I believe that's how I've been able to stay healthy as long as I have now. I know my patterns. I know what tests to run before it becomes these major health crises again, right? Crises. But you've got to know your patterns and your testing. So I do think that's a huge part of it. And then on the physical or emotional side, you've got to look at your priorities. Like, how overscheduled are you? What things can you start to alleviate to make some room, and really implementing a good daily process for mindset and self care is huge.
Hmm. Well, that was a lot. So, not that a person listening to this program has to become a practitioner, but so that they can have a more educated conversation with their practitioner who may not be quite as functional as you are, what kind of tests should they ask for? I'm sure you're looking at hormones, but what types of tests are most revealing?
Yeah. So my two favorite functional labs to start with, one is a comprehensive stool sample, right? There's lots of companies that do them. I prefer Doctor's Data or Genova. Those are the two that we use often. And then for hormone and adrenal mapping, the Dutch test is a dried urine sample that maps your hormones and your adrenals over 24 hours. It shows you inflammatory markers. It shows you neurotransmitters. It is my favorite snapshot for stress and burnout of really what's going on with the body.
Is that a saliva test?
That one's urine. Super
Urine,
easy,
okay.
goes right to your house, send it off. We get the results back in a couple of weeks. The great thing with all of these tests is we can send them anywhere, right? I work with people virtually all over the world, and then we get the results back. And through virtual healthcare, we can review those together.
Excellent. Really good. So if you determine that someone is experiencing burnout with low levels of, like, as you said, progesterone in women, testosterone in men, and other things, gut dysfunction, where do you go from there with that person?
Yeah. So once you do your testing, right, I think that's always the first step for everybody, but then you make an individualized plan. Now, I'm a big fan of having a system and going a little bit more minimal so that you can actually retrain the body to balance itself. I think the number one complaint I hear from someone who has gone more holistic or functional is, well, I went to this doctor, they drew a bunch of labs, and they put me on 15 supplements, right, that I was taking multiple times a day, and I didn't really feel that much better. I felt like I was doing a lot to get really minimal results, right? I hear that so often.
Yeah.
So what we've created that I do and work my clients through is a process that's based on the hierarchy of how your body heals. So instead of trying to throw things at you when a body's already in burnout and probably can't assimilate most of that information anyways, you go after the most important things first and allow your body to remember how to heal, because it can, right? It knows. You believe this, your body can heal. We know that. But you've got to give it the right things at the right time. So just an example of that is typically most people, if there's an immune system trigger or massive amounts of inflammation, those are the places you have to start, because those are the things that will block your body from healing in the first place, even before we can try and balance hormones, right? If you have a chronic bacterial infection or an Epstein-Barr infection or a yeast overgrowth, that has to be managed first before we can expect your hormones to build back up, right?
Right. Yeah.
A lot of people get very frustrated with results in the natural world because I don't think that people follow the actual hierarchy of how our bodies and our nervous systems heal. And that's where you keep hitting these plateaus. We do it differently. We go slower, more intentional, and everything based on the person's physiology, their lifestyle, their emotional traumas, and really make that individualized plan is the most important thing.
Excellent. Well, you brought up a really good point that a lot of practitioners will just throw a bunch of supplements at somebody. And, it's kind of the shotgun approach.
Yeah.
And I call that allopathic nutrition.
That's exactly it.
We can be targeting symptoms, and instead of prescribing somebody some pills, we're giving them a nutritional supplement of some sort. And hopefully, just if you give them enough, hopefully something's going to hit the bullseye. Not a great approach. Very expensive, very time-consuming, and not all that effective. So I think what you're talking about here is a far better approach to getting to know that person, right? And then chopping down the trees that'll make the most bang for the buck at first, right? And then we can start, fine-tuning things down the road.
Yes, and it is amazing when you go after the first thing first, how many other things fall into place, right? There's so many times where you don't even have to necessarily go back and fully address the hormone imbalance itself or the fatigue you used to have or the vitamin deficiency that used to be there, because once your immune system is better, your gut is well functioning, and the inflammation is gone, your body starts to balance those things on its own. So being a little bit more patient on the front end always works better in the long term.
Yeah, for sure. I call that vitalism. And that is the concept that the body knows how to heal. We don't have to teach our cells how to do their jobs. They know how to function. Our jobs as practitioners and as individuals, health enthusiasts, is to get the obstacles out of the way and let these magnificent biochemical machines that God created do what they already know how to do, and that is to thrive. And it sounds like you've experienced that quite a bit in your office.
Yes, but I think that's exactly it, is we really can heal, and too many medications and too many supplements can actually slow down that process, not even speed it up. So I think there's been a huge misconception as far as both traditional medicine and holistic medicine goes on that side of things. Your body doesn't need that much. It just needs no interference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And, there's a lot we know a lot about the body, right? We know a lot about anatomy and physiology, but there's a lot we don't understand just yet, right? So we've got to lean on that God-given wisdom and let the body do its thing. And getting the obstacles out of the way is the way to go.
Yeah.
So Dr. Shannyn, I know a lot of people, when they go to their regular family practice doctor, they might run a standard blood panel and they suspect that they have thyroid issues, or they suspect they have adrenal weakness, adrenal fatigue going on. But the doctor takes a look at the blood work and he says, well, everything looks normal. It must be all in your head, which is what you got when you were 10 years old, right? Speak to that for a minute about how we can't really rely on blood work exclusively, which is a big mistake a lot of doctors make.
Such a huge mistake. So blood work in general is very limited, right? Number one, it's only a 1-point snapshot during the day. Your adrenals, your hormones, and your thyroid hormone are all pulsatile and they have different rhythms. So just getting a 1-point snapshot, you're missing a ton of information. But in addition to that, even what they run, when you think you got a comprehensive panel, I cannot tell you how many times somebody comes to me and says, well, my doctor just ran a bunch of blood work. They said everything looked okay. And I say, go ahead and send it over to me. And that bunch of blood work ends up being very few values that actually give you any type of answer, right? What they're looking at is end stage numbers. You have to be a pretty sick individual before that standard panel is out of range. But you're not getting any whys. You're getting a whole lot of what's out of range, but you still have no idea why. Especially one of my favorite topics to talk about is thyroid, because in the traditional model, they're testing TSH, which actually isn't even a thyroid hormone, right? It's a brain hormone that speaks to the thyroid based on what's going on in the environment of your body, but it doesn't actually tell you thyroid function. And most people who are on a thyroid medication, the only indication for them to be on that was TSH, which is so flawed, or the T4. And T4 is only one of your several thyroid hormones. So looking at just the thyroid, you have no idea if you actually have a thyroid problem or not, right? You just might not have a TSH problem. And then how connected the thyroid is to the adrenal glands, it's still not well understood in the medical community. They'll say adrenal fatigue isn't a real thing. Yeah, it is. We see it all the time. In fact, on the Synthroid website, right, the thyroid medication most often prescribed, it says on their website, the number one indication, contraindication, meaning you shouldn't be on a thyroid medication, is if you have adrenal insufficiency. So when somebody comes on a thyroid medication, the first question I always ask them is, did your doctor check your adrenals before prescribing your medication? And if the answer is no, you're in big trouble, because that is the number one reason to not be on a medication if your adrenals are already not working properly. And they just said insufficiency, not failure, not fatigue, just insufficient adrenal function affects your thyroid that much that you probably shouldn't even be on the medication, yet that's never tested. Like, that blows my mind. No wonder these women, you've probably seen this before too. I always say you go to the doctor, right? Or you're not feeling good. Tell me if you've seen this before. The woman who has hair loss, she's always cold, she's gaining weight, and she's moody. She Googles her symptoms, and Dr. Google tells her it's her thyroid, right? She goes to the doctor, and she says, doctor, I think it's a thyroid problem. So one of two things happen. They run her labs, and they say, oh yeah, your TSH is off. It is your thyroid. Here's your prescription. Let's retest in 90 days and see how you're doing. So she goes home, and she starts a prescription. And nothing changes. Her hair is still falling out. She's not losing weight. She still feels terrible. She doesn't feel any better. She's thinking, oh, it must be that the medication's not working. But she goes back to the doctor. They run her post labs and they say, guess what? Your TSH is normal. The medication is doing exactly its job. You're great. Oh, you must be stressed. Or maybe if you would just lose a little weight, you'll feel better. And this woman is sent on her way to be on a medication for life when it hasn't made her feel any better, but her numbers are normal. Right? Like, that's a very frustrating situation.
Sure.
Or you think it's your thyroid. You go to the doctor, they run your labs, and they say, nope, your labs are normal. It's not your thyroid. And then you get the same junk. Maybe you're stressed. Maybe you should lose weight. Maybe you should exercise more. And you're sent on your way when they've really only looked at a tiny fragment of the puzzle. And you're missing so many root cause answers that you need to regain your health.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really profound. A couple things, a couple points I want to make here, and that is when it comes to blood work, people sending stuff into the lab are already sick people for the most part,
Yes.
right? And the lab takes those samples and says we're going to have 90% of those samples are going to be considered normal, then 10% are going to be outside of that normal, and the doctors are looking for disease states, not necessarily lack of function, right? So when the doctor says everything looks normal, that doesn't mean a whole lot at all. You've got to probe a little deeper than that, right?
Yeah. No, but I love that point. It's like, well, do you want to be normal based on everyone else's junk, right? Like if you look around at the average person, that's not the health I want for myself, yet that's who you're being stacked up against. So having the courage to say, I still don't feel well, or I don't think that this is my optimal, and wanting to dive deeper, which, unfortunately, it does typically mean you're going to have to go and find your own help. Here's what I often run into, and I want to kind of clear this up for some people, is I'll get asked all the time, what labs can I ask my doctor to run, or how can I get these covered by insurance? And I know that's what everyone wants, right? I wish that was the way it goes. But the truth is, for the in-depth testing that you need, because everything in the insurance medical model is based on medical necessity, right? You're only covered if it's medically necessary. If you don't have an active diagnosis code, disease, or reason, they're probably not going to get covered, right? Which is why so many people don't have access to really good holistic healthcare, because there is that barrier. But if you're looking for answers, if you're the person who is just so sick of not feeling good, of always getting, told no, or feeling that they're not being listened to, there are tons of practitioners out there, especially with virtual healthcare now. You no longer just have to go to the doctor in your town. You can work with people anywhere in the world. You have access to these things, but unfortunately, it's probably not going to come from your primary care anymore. They are there for emergencies, right? They are there for medications, prescriptions, surgeries, antibiotics. If you want anything outside of that, you're probably going to have to find a different doctor.
Right. And there's a pretty good chance it is going to be a cash practice, right? But here's the thing. If you want different results, you're going to have to do things differently, right? So what the insurance model does is it takes the responsibility for your healthcare and puts it over to the insurance company, and the doctor gets paid by the insurance company on your behalf. Why not take that responsibility on ourselves and say, no, I'm the one that's responsible for my health. I'm going to pay my doctor directly because he's the one that's working with me. Working through the insurance company is just a roundabout way. And when doctors have to comply with all the insurance requirements, there's some rather severe restrictions on what they can do, right? Those insurance companies tell them how to operate, and that's a pretty severe limitation, and something that if someone's dealing with a chronic issue that they know there's something wrong and the doctors can't figure it out, you're going to have to come up with a different way of doing business.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. Because if you keep doing what they call standard of care, you're also going to get standard of health. And right now in North America and several other places in the world, that standard of health is pretty sad.
Right. Not real good. Yeah. So talk to us a little bit more about how the thyroid and the adrenals, the hypothalamus, all that work together to bring us the energy and the vitality and everything that we want with as far as our health and wellness goes.
Yeah. So let's start with thyroid, because that's the one that almost everyone thinks it's their thyroid, right? And most women, especially the ones that I meet with issues, it is one of the most commonly prescribed medications of all of them right now is the thyroid medication. But your thyroid is a responder. It is not the doer, it's a responder. So by the time your thyroid levels are off, it's because you have other imbalances in your body that your thyroid has responded to. So just a brief science lesson, what happens is we have our TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone. Your brain releases that to talk to the thyroid. The thyroid primarily makes your T4 hormone. That's your storage hormone, which most of your Synthroid, generic Synthroid, levothyroxine, those are T4 types of medication, which that alone is faulty because that's a storage hormone. And then from that point, that T4 gets delivered through the bloodstream to different areas in your body where it has to be converted to T3, which is your active thyroid hormone that does all the magic, right? That gives you the energy, that makes you feel great, that turns on your metabolism. But that means those areas that convert T4 to T3 have to be working properly for you to get those benefits. And the main areas that gets converted is in the gut, which so many people have microbiome dysfunction, gut issues, digestive issues, leaky gut type symptoms. So you're probably not converting it very well there. The adrenal glands, which we just talked about, we're all stressed out. We all have these issues. We all have either too high or too low cortisol because of our standard life and the speed at which we run. So you're probably not converting a lot of it there. Mm-hmm. Your liver is another one. Well, we're bombarded by toxins, our food, our environment, our air, our water. So you're probably not getting really great conversion there. So all of these women on a T4 medication who can't convert it to T3 anyways is why you're on the medication, your levels look good, but you still feel terrible, because it's not just about giving you one teeny tiny hormone. It's about the way your body can metabolize and convert that into the active hormone. Excellent. And then your body takes that active hormone and says, oh, okay, we either have enough or too little T3. And then it talks back up to the brain, right? Where it tells the brain again to either release more TSH or less TSH. And then we go back through that loop again. So if you've only ever really investigated TSH and your only help is by taking a T4, look how many pieces of that puzzle you're missing that have to click together for you to actually feel vibrant, to be healthier, truly regardless of what those numbers look like. It's all about function. And so many people are missing that function.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I often say in this podcast is that a medically trained doctor, a doctor of allopathy, MDs, they treat the illness that has the person. Whereas a holistic practitioner, a naturopath as I am, or a functional practitioner as you are, we treat the person that has the illness. And it's a completely different approach. It's like night and day. Allopathic medicine, great for emergencies, as you said. But when you're dealing with chronic health challenges, it's going to take a little more detective work, and it's going to take a little more time to just, this drive-through mentality of, hey, doc, see the doc for 5 minutes, walk out with a prescription in hand and pop some pills, a pill for every ill, so to speak. It's just not gonna make it anymore, is it?
No, it really doesn't. And you know what else is starting to be talked about a little bit more that I actually added into my practice several years ago because I found it was a big missing piece for people in general in their healing journey, is how much your nervous system, your emotions, trauma, and those types of things will play into your body's physical ability to heal. And that is something that is never addressed in the allopathic world either. Right. But even if you have the best testing, if you're taking all the greatest supplements, if you're cleaning up your food, if your nervous system is in chaos, if there are emotions you haven't dealt with, if there are traumas from the past that are making abnormal communication from your brain to your body, that could be your next block to your biggest breakthrough. So I've started doing, just as much as we do the lab testing and the kind of bouncing on that side, teaching people how to do somatic work for their nervous system, how to balance their brain, how to get better rewiring and firing of your neurons, because that is, our nervous system controls everything, right? It controls your immune system. It controls your endocrine system. The nervous system is key. And that is almost never properly addressed with people, even in most holistic and functional medicine practices. That's still a piece of the puzzle that I believe is really lacking and why people don't get the breakthrough they're looking for.
Well, we could obviously do a whole episode on this topic alone, but could you hit a couple of the highlights of what it takes to retrain some of the thought life that comes along with the stress that we create ourselves in our minds?
Yeah. So one of the simplest things you can do is start rewiring your patterns, right? First, you have to identify them. So we call them your triggers. What things trigger you into an emotion, right? And if you took a day and really watched it, you're going to start to be able to identify some of these things, right? Is it when you feel overwhelmed, or do you feel embarrassed, or do you feel like you were wrong? Or, for everybody, there's going to be different ones of these things. But what I encourage people to do is take a week and notice when you start to feel agitated, when you start to feel overwhelmed, brain foggy, when the emotions start to go all over the place. Can you start identifying what types of situations created that, right? And then how do we replace that with a healthier habit? So I love what's called somatic work, where you actually physically get your body to calm down. It's the fastest way you can retrain your nervous system. And some examples of that is like emotional freedom technique, which is the tapping. If you've ever done that,
Yes,
the tapping
I
technique.
It's
Doing
very
things
useful.
like, I love it. Creative visualization, breath work, somatic breath work, anything that you can do to get a physical response from your body when you are feeling triggered is how you retrain it to not have that same response. So for example, if you notice when somebody corrects you and you get embarrassed, you start to get anxious. Well, at that next time that happens, being able to sit down and take yourself through a tapping practice or do some breath work to calm your nervous system response, you're going to have less of those activations as you move forward. That is so powerful. And it's time and repetition, right? Doing it once doesn't change your brain, but doing it repeatedly, you get that neuroplasticity. You will get new firing in the brain, and things that used to really disorient you won't affect you so much anymore. So repetition is huge.
Really good stuff. Yeah, I always say it's difficult to be physically relaxed and emotionally stressed at the same time, right? So we have this interconnectedness. So if we can relax our bodies, the thought life will tend to follow. And the same is true in the other direction. If we can calm down those anxious thoughts, then the body will start to come in line with that more rest and digest parasympathetic side of the nervous system. So yeah, good stuff. Really, really, really good stuff. So you teach that to your clients, huh?
Yes. Yeah. We do a lot of brain balancing, a lot of somatic work. That's just as much of the work as the actual lab testing and protocols.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite supplement company that you use, or do you have your own line of supplements? What do you do?
I'm actually, in the process of doing our own line, which is going to be my Empowered Woman series, the things I really believe most women need to protect their adrenals, their brain health, those types of things. So that is going to come out in the next couple of months. But I use a lot. I probably have 4 or 5 different companies. Each one I feel like does a really good job of a certain area of support. So I have one company that I really like as far as infections and immune system work, another one that I use more for inflammatory stuff. I have another company I really like for their hormone balance. So I'm a picker and chooser based on what things I'm looking for. So we have several different companies that we use.
Yeah, I am too. It's hard to just settle in on one manufacturer really because there's a lot of good stuff out there, but a lot to choose from. So I know there's a lot of rebuilding going on when we go to sleep. So could you talk to the audience a little bit about what happens to our hormones and neurotransmitters during sleep?
Yeah. So your nervous system is actually one of the few systems that does speed up and repair it at night, right? Most things calm down and rest, but your nervous system is doing the work. It's processing and integrating the day, the emotions, the things to allow you to move that through and then wake up the next day regenerated. Now, especially when it comes to adrenal health and thyroid health, most of that balance, people who have odd sleep patterns or night owls, most of that balance really does happen in the hours that you're getting sleep before midnight, which when I tell that to people, they're like, oh man, it's so hard to get several hours before midnight. But hormonally and for your adrenals, that's very important. There are also different times. I always tell people this. If you wake up a lot at night, try and track if you wake up at the same times, because that can give you a really good indication what part of your body, what organ system might be off based on what times you wake up. For example, if you are waking up more of that midnight 1 a.m., we could be looking at some more adrenal dysfunction. Between 2 and 3 a.m., we're looking at more liver. If you're waking up feeling groggy, like 5 or 6, you're probably not getting the awakening response from your cortisol. There's some really valuable information you can get based on when your sleep is interrupted, because at different phases of your sleep, different organ systems are activating to heal and balance. So you can get a lot of information from someone's sleep patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. So our bodies are constantly talking to us, but we got to learn their language, right? We got to learn how to listen to what they're telling us.
Yeah. You know what I always tell that's a perfect point. I always tell my patients to get curious around why your body is doing anything, right? Like if it's telling you if you have an ache or a pain, or if you're tired that day, or if your eyes are puffy, just start asking those questions. Start wondering, why is my body responding like this? And if we would get good at asking those questions, I really think we would come to a lot of great conclusions for our own personal health before it turns into that big, blow up, right? Like your body slowly talks to you. It whispers, then it
Right.
talks, then it raises its voice, and then it screams really loudly. And for most of us, we wait till it's screaming at us to do anything when it started whispering 5 years ago, right? Like you had
Yeah.
signs,
Yeah.
you just didn't listen.
Weren't listening very well or didn't care. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
speaking of that, it's a great lead in. What is some of the low hanging fruit that people can look, some of the easy stuff that they can implement to try to avoid burnout in the first place?
Yeah. So simple, but really, I think makes a big change. Remove some of the toxic load and inflammation from your food, right? That's something anybody can do that doesn't cost a whole lot of money, with the biggest ones being gluten. I really believe most gluten, especially in North America, is full of toxins. Most soy products, especially if they're non-fermented in America, are full of toxins. And most cow's dairy, if you're not getting really good raw milk, like those are the three things that most people should eliminate from their nutrition just to take the physical stressor off of their body as far as food goes. You don't have to go crazy and follow a really strict nutrition plan. You don't have to go crazy and cut out all carbs necessarily. That might not be right for you. But cut out
Right.
the toxic food groups, right? The things that we know are inflammatory to our body. That's
Right.
a great free start for everybody. And then implementing a good mindset routine daily. So I actually gave you a link to one of my favorite things. I've created my morning routine PDF where I walk you through the 5 things I do in 10 minutes or less every day to balance my brain, to get really good adrenal support so that I can protect myself from a burnout. So I've actually created that document and gave it to you to offer to your listeners as well. But implementing that daily is so helpful to just keep your nervous system calm.
How long does it take you to go through the morning routine?
If you just do those 5 steps, I kept it really simple. It's 10-15 minutes.
Yeah. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Great way to start.
And doable,
Excellent.
right? I think that's compliance is
Right.
key. It has to be doable
Right.
at first.
It's
And then you can
got
add
to
more
be
stuff.
doable.
Start with the things you can do.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I tell people start off with baby steps and make your goals so small that success is absolutely guaranteed.
Yeah.
Right. And then you can build up, start stepping up a little bit as you build momentum. That's the way to go. You don't want to start off, running a 24-mile marathon. That's not going to work. We know that doesn't work at a physical level, but it also, the same thing applies at a mental emotional level when we're developing our confidence and we're developing new neural pathways to approach a different way of doing things. We've got to start off small so that we don't fail. We don't, fall on our faces over and over. We're going to get discouraged. We're going to give up. So it's got to be doable.
And have grace with yourself. So many people in
Mm-hmm.
burnout, high achievers, entrepreneurs, health professionals, parents, like people who have passion for what they do in life are very hard on themselves. And they feel like if you're not
Yeah.
being perfect, you're not making progress. And that really isn't true. And there are a lot of plans out there that make it feel that way, right? If you don't do this perfectly, or if you're not in this level or this range of things, and that can feel crushing to somebody who doesn't know where to start. Don't feel
Right.
like you have to be that strict on yourself. Make progress, not perfection. And if you fall off, you get right back on. I call it the refractory period, right? It's not that we don't mess up, fall off, make a mistake. It's that what used to be maybe years of your life, right, that you were off track, turns to months, turns to weeks, turns to days, turns to hours, right? You have that one item and you immediately say, you know what? Okay, it happened, but my next meal, I'm going to do the right thing, or that tomorrow I'm going to wake up and do some healthy movement. Shorten the refractory period, and that alone will create you better health. But I think that grace and just being as supportive to yourself as you would be to somebody else, right? Have you ever heard that? Like, why the things I say to myself, I would never say to you, right? Like that just wouldn't be something that would come out of my mouth. But why do we treat ourselves like that? Self-compassion is a huge healing tool.
Yeah, that's great stuff. So that's some really gold there. So one last question, Dr. Shannyn, is if someone could only take away one thing from what we talked about today, we talked about a lot, what do you want them to take away?
I really believe, and my soapbox to stand on, is that people are struggling with their health because of a lack of investigation. I do believe that really good functional testing, knowing your pathways, knowing your patterns, knowing how to properly support your physiology is true preventative healthcare. My mission in life is to make it more accessible to more people. But if you are struggling with something, if you know something is not right in your body, if you're bordering on burnout, or you might be fully there, you have got to know what your physiology is doing and be able to support that as best as possible.
Excellent. That's really good. All right. If people want to get a hold of you, they want to work with you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the PDF I gave you guys, there's also all of my contact information on there. There's also a link if you want to schedule. We offer free transformation calls, so a free 30-minute call to go through health history, give you next steps and recommendations. Feel free to schedule a call. Or I do a lot of my content on TikTok and Instagram, tons of free teaching, lots of content, health-related topics. So follow me on social media.
What's your social media handle?
It's Dr. Shannyn DC, DrShannyn DC on both TikTok and Instagram.
Excellent. And I'm sure your phone contact, email, and all that website is on the PDF.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll be sure to put that in the show notes. Well, Dr. Shannyn, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you giving us your time.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
For more, go to the show notes page at davidsandstrom.com/83. There you can find links to all the resources that were mentioned, as well as a full downloadable transcript. And I always put some kind of a content upgrade to help you go deeper with that episode. That's it for now. I'll talk with you next week. Be blessed.